Hey guys, so starting this video off, I actually realized during the editing process that I cut out a small section of the video on accident, and that is the part where I create a blueprint interface event. So I'm going to show you how to do that real quick and then we'll get to the video. So to create a blueprint interface, it's really simple. You just right click, go to blueprint interface, and then just give it a name. And then once you have created that interface event, all you have to do is go into your character, your AI character, go up to class settings, go to implement and interfaces and hit add, and then search for the interface that you just created. Okay, back to the video. I'll save it. Now what I want to do is create a damage trace for whenever our AI is attacking. So what we can do, the way I like to do damage traces is with blueprint interfaces, and since we already created an interface earlier, we can just use the same interface. So if we go to our BPI new AI, we can add a new function, and we're going to call this damage trace. And then if we go back to our AI here, let's go back out to the event graph. And then what I'm going to do, if we look on our left in interfaces, we have a damage trace event. Let's double click that to add it. And so what we should do, let's go ahead and get our mesh. We're going to pull that in. Let's do get socket location. And then essentially what we want to do is get the location of a socket, and then we're going to do a trace event for when that happens, right? So what we need to do is get the socket name. Let's see. Give me 1 second to think this through. Let's go ahead for now. We'll probably end up changing this, but for now, let's go ahead and select our skeleton and take a look at the sockets inside of it, or bone names. Okay, so we have left-hand socket right here. Let's go ahead, and if we double click on that, we can copy the text, go back to our blueprint, and we'll paste that in. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do sphere trace by channel. Make sure it is not the multi-sphere trace, but just a single. And then we're going to set the start and end location to be the same. Because it's a hand and not like a sword or something, if it were a sword, we would want to get socket locations for the start, like where the handle of the sword is and where the tip of the sword is, and then that's what you would, if the tip of the sword, you would put into the end location. But for our purposes, we're actually, you know what? If we're trying to make this modular, we should probably do that. We're going to do it the proper way. So we're going to duplicate the get socket location. This will be the start. This will be the end socket. Let's go ahead and promote this to a variable. Start trace socket. End trace socket. Okay, so now what we want to do is we're going to break the hit result, create a branch, and wire up the return value, and then we're going to expand this hit results, and out of hit actor, we're going to do search for actor has tag, and we're going to type in the tag for your character, which is player for me. We're going to create another branch and wire it in. And so if it has hit the character, we're going to pull out of the hit actor and we're going to do apply damage. For the damage causer, we're going to set it to self. And then now we need to create a variable for damage. So we'll go ahead and promote that to a variable. And we're going to handle this kind of a different way. There's a certain way that I like to handle damage that I think is more optimal. I know a lot of people like to use data tables, but the problem with using data tables with attack animations and using damage is, say, what if you have an animation that has multiple attacks within inside of it? If you were just to like create a data table and just like, hey, like one variable for damage, then you won't be able to have that control of like, I want this first punch to deal, 20, and I want the second punch to deal like 50 or something like that. So we'll handle that a different way, but we have our variable created here. Let's go ahead and compile it. Now I think it's time we create some Anim Notify events. So let's go to our folder here, and I'm going to create a new folder just for the Anim Notify events. So Anim Notifies. Let's open that up. We're going to right click, go to Blueprint class, and then we're going to search for Anim Notify. But we're not going to do a normal Anim Notify event. What we're looking for is this Anim Notify state here. So let's go ahead and select that. And then we're going to do AN damage trace. Okay, so let's open that up. Now inside of here, what we can do is we can override a function. So if we click on this override tab here and we go to receive notify tick, we can click on that and it will create this new function for us. And out of this function, we can grab our mesh component, which is essentially just the mesh for the character, and then we can do a search for get owner. And so now we have access to the owner, and now what we can do is call that blueprint interface event that we created, which is called damage trace. So we'll pull out, we'll do a search for damage trace message. Let's see, it's the new AI. That's the one that we want. And so with this, what we can do is inside of our attack animation, let's go to it real quick. If I go to our data assets and I open up attack animations, we know this is the left hand, so we're going to use this one for the moment. So if we open it up, what we can do is we can call that Anim Notify event. So I'm gonna go ahead, about right here is where I'm gonna call it. So if you look right here where it says notifies, we're going to select the track number 1, and then under add notify state, we're gonna call AN damage trace. And so if we go and try to time where the damage should end, it should be about right here. So we're just gonna take that second half and move it out. There we go. So now what we need to do inside of our AI character, let's go back here. So this is our damage trace, and it's going to fire off through tick whenever the animation is happening. But there's something that we need to do to prevent the damage from being applied multiple times. Because it's firing on tick, if it hits the character and applies the damage, it's going to be like, it's going to apply a whole bunch of damage, which we don't want. So one way to handle that is through arrays. So what we can do Out of our hit actor, we can do add unique, and then this input pin here, we're going to promote that to a variable, and we're going to call it hit actors. And so we're going to plug that in here, and then we'll go ahead and plug that in here. So what we want to do is, once we've added the hit actor to an array, we want to prevent it from doing any more damage until the attack is finished, right? So if we duplicate this hit arrays actor and we pull out and we do contains item, we're asking to begin with, is the hit actor already within this this array? And if they already are within that array, we can, it'll fire off through the true, and then we can just have that not deal any damage. But if they aren't inside the array, we're going to then add them into the array. Just like that. So how it's going to work, it's going to start off, there's nothing inside the array, so it's going to go through the false. Then we're going to add the hit actor to the array. That way, the next time the tick event fires off, and it fires off this trace, it's going to say, oh, he's already inside of here, don't deal any damage. And then the last thing we need to do is we need to reset, we need to clear this array after the attack is finished, right? And so there's a couple ways to handle it. We're going to go back to that example of the multiple attacks within one animation, though. Let's say if I were to take this hit arrays and let's go to our attack animation here, right? Let's say if I were to take this, set it here, and then this is where I clear it. The issue is, let's say we have a 3 attack animation that plays. The first time it hits, it's going to add the hit actor to the array, which means that the second time it tries to hit the character, it's not going to apply any damage. So what we need to do to remedy that is to create another Anim Notify event that will fire off, and then it will clear the array whenever we want it to clear inside of the animation blueprint. Or not anim blueprint, but the animation itself. So let's go back to our folder, go to our Anim Notifies. Let's create a blueprint class, and this time we're going to search for Anim Notify, but we're going to do the regular notify event this time and not the notify state. So we're going to call this an whoops, decided to save randomly. Okay, an clear hit actors. Okay, so we're going to open this up. Actually, before this, let's go ahead and head back to our blueprint interface event. We need to create a new function for it. Clear hit actors. There we go. Let's go back to our Anim Notify, and this time we're going to do on received notify through the override notify event. We're going to do the same thing of getting the owner, but this time we're going to search for clear hit actor array, or clear hit actors. So now let's head back to our AI's blueprints. And so here is our damage trace, right? So let's keep the event kind of close to it. So I'm going to do over here the new interface event that we created. We're going to double click on clear hit actors. I'm going to scooch this up here. And now I'm going to copy the hit actors array, and then we're going to clear it. Just wipes it clean and resets it. So now if we head back to our animation again, once this is finished, we can call a new notify event. We should probably create a new track. We'll call clear hit actors. But here we're going to right click, add notify, and then AN clear hit actors. So once the first attack is finished, we're going to clear the array. And let's say we had a second attack right after it, we would do the same thing. We would put in another AN damage, and then we would clear the array after that one as well. That way you have a lot of control. And there's one more aspect to this. I mentioned that I handle damage differently than a lot of people, and I'm going to show you how to do that now. And that is also handled through AN notifies, right? So I'm going to create a new folder here inside of our Anim Notifies folder, and I'm going to call this one damage. So we're going to right click, blueprint class, and then we're going to do Anim Notify, just the regular notify. And so I'm going to call this one AN10, and that's for 10 damage, right? So if we open this up, go to the override function, receive notify. It's time to actually go back to our blueprint interface event, or our blueprint interface again. We're going to create a new function and call this one damage. And then this time inside of, we're going to create an input right here. So let's go ahead and create a new input. And we're going to call this one damage amount. And it will be a float. We'll go ahead and compile it. And so we'll head back to our AN10. We're going to get the owner. We're going to search for damage. And then here is where we can apply how much damage we want to deal. So for this, since I said 10, we're going to insert 10. And then from here, it's going to be really simple. All we got to do is duplicate this. I'm going to name this one 20. Open it up. Go to the event. Change this to 20. So I'm going to skip forward through this. I'm going to probably put in like 10 of them. Okay, as you can see, I've created damage amounts from 10 to 100. And now all we need to do is if we go to our animation, before we call this AN damage event, or this AN damage notify, we can just create a new track here, call this our damage track, and then all we got to do is search for add notify, and then set it to whatever damage amount we want it to be. So this one I'm just going to do 30. But say like the first punch you wanted 30, the second time you would, if you wanted 50, you would just do this. Nice and simple, and you have full control over it. Let me go ahead and exit all these notify events that I created. Okay. So now, if we go to our AI, we will add in that new damage interface. Let's bring it up here. And then all we got to do is set this damage 0 here. Oh, I know why I set it as 0. It's because we named the notify event that. So we're just going to call this dealt damage. And then all we got to do is just set it like this. And yep, that doesn't surprise me. There we go. That fixed it. It was a naming issue. Sometimes if you name, like an interface event like the same as another variable, it'll get confused. But if you just name it something different and then, recompile it, it tends to fix it. Okay, so we have that done. So now I would like to go into what we need to do is define if it's a left attack or a right attack. So we need to create one more or two more Anim Notify events here, and then that will define if it should, if it's a left attack, if it should get the socket of the left hand or the right hand. So let's do that real quick. Go to our Anim Notifies. I'm going to create a new notify. And then this, I'm going to do ANL attack. I'm going to duplicate, or I'm going to open this up real quick. Receive the notify. Same thing. Get owner. And then, of course, we need to go back here. This time, we only need to create one function for this. We'll call this attack. I don't know if we would want to call it direction. We would probably want to call it attack hand. And then we would want to create an input for it, and we'll call this left. If it's left, it'll fire off as true. If it's not left, then that means it's the right hand. So we'll do that. So here we go. And then what do we call it again? We called it attack hand. There we go. And I named this one left, so we're going to set this one true. Compile. And now we're going to duplicate it. ANR attack. Open it up and just set it false. And you guessed it, we're going to go back to our AI's blueprint. Create a new event for attack hand. We're going to promote this to a variable, except I'm going to call this is left hand attack. So now that we have that information, what we can do is create a branch before the damage trace. Well, actually, we should probably do that. Let's see. Yes, this is what we want. Okay, so I'm gonna pop that in there. If it's the left hand. So what we need to do, we're going to do this a little differently. We're going to promote this first top one to a variable. We'll call this trace start location. Promote this bottom one. We're going to call it trace end location. We're going to wire both of those up and then set them here. And I think for this top one, I'm going to move this over here. Kind of a mess. Give me 1 second. There we go. Okay, so what I want to do is we're going to rename these right here. We're going to do, we're going to call this one L attack start socket. L attack end socket. We're gonna duplicate this, drag it down here, and then we're gonna delete these, promote them to a variable, and then our attack start socket do our attack in socket duplicate these, wire them into the false, don't forget to connect these. So here is our start, here is our end. Do it like this. Kind of ugly laid out, but it will work. Let's go ahead and compile this. So now what we need to do inside of our data asset, let's create these 4 variables so that we can define which bones they should originate from, the tray should originate from. So if we go to our data asset, wherever it is, there we go. Okay, and those are name variables, so L L attack starts socket, make it a name, go ahead and duplicate it, L attack end, R attack, R attack starts. There we go. Alright, so let's take a look at our skeleton again real quick. This one is just left hand socket, right? So if we wanted to be fancy, we could do left hand socket, and then we could do, I don't know, like the finger, like index, you know, or like the the middle finger. But I think we can just name it the same in our case. But if you had like a sword or something, you could just do like, you know, start, L start, and then L end, and then R start, R end. But for our purpose, let's just use this, copy this, go back to our data asset for our character, we'll paste it in here, and then it's safe to assume that these 2 will just be right. There we go, go ahead and save it. So now, what we need to do is go to our animation again. We're going to create a new notify track. We're going to call this attack hand. So right here, add notify. We're going to scroll down. ANL attack. And you just want to make sure they're spaced a little far apart, you know, just before the other starts. I could even scoot this damage down a little bit. Oops. There we go. So when it happens, it's going to say, hey, this is the left hand that's attacking. Hey, we want to apply 30 damage. We're going to start the damage trace, and then we're going to clear the hit actor array. Let's go ahead and save this. And so now, to see this in action, let's go to our AI. And then what we're going to do is on the sphere trace itself, oh, actually, we do need to define a radius for the trace. So this one, you could do a little differently. Like if you really wanted to, you could just add this to your AI's data asset. Because most likely, if you're attacking with one weapon, you're going to have the same weapon for that throughout the entire fight. And so you could just add this variable to your data asset. I'm going to call this trace radius. There we go. Go ahead and save this. I think that's what we're going to do in our case. But if you wanted to, say, you had an AI that has two weapons and one of them's like a giant club and then one of them's like a sword or something, you could do the same thing that we did with the damage, and you would just create a new blueprint interface event to let it know like the radius to do the trace. And then you would just do it the exact same way through the Anim Notify events. For us, we're just going to do attack. Actually, we're just going to do trace radius. Make that a float. I'm going to set the default at something like, 8. I'll move this up here, keep it with all the other floats. Go back to our AI. We're going to go to set AI variables. Let's scroll to the end here. Get our trace radius. We're going to set the trace radius. And now, let's go ahead and go back to our event graph. Go to where our trace damage is happening, and then we can draw a debug for it. If we hit this and then select for duration, we can see if this is working or not. Okay, so we see it did do the trace. I didn't set one up for the right attack animation yet, but it is doing it for the left. But the issue I'm seeing, it looks like it's an attack for a sword. And I didn't realize that. I thought it was just a regular like punch. In which case I should have put it in the middle of where it's happening. Or actually, I see what's happening. It's playing, they're both right-handed attacks, but it's originating from the left hand. So if I were to go back to our animation here, change this to our attack, that should fix the problem. You see the trace is originating underneath, so let's see what's happening with that. I know what the issue is. I forgot to create, I forgot to add those to our AI inside of the set variables. This L attack in socket and whatnot. So let's do that real quick. Do that here at the end. Okay, now it should work. Let's give it a shot. Okay. Alright, we got it to trace. which is good. Only issue I'm seeing now is that the trace is very sparse. Okay, so since our sphere trace wasn't firing off enough times, we may want to look into doing this a little bit differently. The first thing I'm going to do is actually give our character a sword, because I think that would be a little better, a little more complete. So I have attached our sword to our character's mesh. So now let's go get the hand socket. We'll do our right hand socket. There we go, except I would like to rotate this 180. There we go. So now that we have our sword, let's go ahead and then we're going to attach that. Actually, that is our left. We want to attach that to the right. If we had a weapon in our left hand, we could then add that mesh here. But we're essentially replacing our, our character's mesh with the skeletal mesh for the sword. And so let's open up the sword real quick. Okay, so we have a couple sockets in here. We have top socket, we have middle socket, and we also have a bottom socket. So let's do a top and bottom. So if we go into our data asset, instead of using right hand socket, we'll do bottom socket, top socket. And it's really simple to add in sockets into a skeletal mesh if you don't know how. All you have to do is go into the skeletal mesh, make sure you click on the root, and then you would just hit add socket and name it whatever you want, and then you can also drag it to wherever you want to be on the mesh. Okay, so we have our socket names here. We've attached the sword to the character. Let's go back here real quick. And then before, whoops, what's going on here? Oh, it's because there's nothing attached to it. So how should we do this? I'm gonna go ahead and just duplicate this and add this here. There we go. And if we really wanted to, what we could do is just add in a mesh for the other hand and then hide it inside of the game and turn off any kind of collision for it. We could also use the construction script to determine if it is one-handed or two-handed, and then thus would affect our logic here. But we've set it up, and before I go any further, what I'd like to do is go into our other animation. Okay, our other animation, and then apply the same things here. Here we go. Now let's see if that's any better. Seem to be working all that well. So let's default to a plan B, and we're going to use a collision, like a sphere collision. So let's go back into our character. I'm going to go to the sword. I'm going to do add. I'm going to search for capsule collision. And then we're going to make this encompass the blade. There we go. That looks good to me. I'm going to go ahead and compile it. And so for our collision, I'm going to type in collision, and then I'm just going to set it to overlap everything. We want to make sure that generate overlap events is checked. So now what we want to do, we're going to right click on this capsule. We're going to do on component begin overlap. And we're going to do things a little differently here. Okay, so with this, we want to get out of other actor. Actor has tag, player, now instead of doing a trace, what we can do, we're actually going to just move this over here. I'm going to plug this in. And then now we're just going to replace the inputs here. So if our collision detects a mesh, or if it detects our character, it's going to add them to an array, and it's going to deal the damage. And then of course we're going to clear the damage like we were before using this animation notify here. And then if you really wanted to, what you could do is on begin play here, we can go into our set AI variables here to set the scale we'll do relative scale of our capsule component. So if we look at the scale here, we're looking at 25 for the X, or 0.25 for the X, 0.25 for the Y. So let's split this structure pin here. So now we have our X and Y and Z. Z, I think we can just leave it at 1. And then for our trace radius, we could set that here for the X and the Y. And then we would just need to adjust this to something that we want inside of our data asset. So instead of 0.8, or instead of 8, we'll do I don't know, 0.22. Still need a way to make it trigger when it can deal the damage. So instead of using a trace event, if we go into our AN damage trace here, what we can do is simply on begin notify. Here, we can do it this way. We'll delete this receive notify event, and then we'll just do begin notify. We're going to paste that into here. Begin damage trace. Now what I want to do is open up our blueprint interface and change this damage trace so that it has a Boolean value. So if we go our interface, if we go to damage trace, we can add in a Boolean. We'll do can damage. Okay, we'll go ahead and save it. Go back to our damage here. So on notify begin, it can deal damage. We'll go ahead and copy this and go to notify end. then set this to false. And then lastly, we need to go back to our AI. And then where this is happening here, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of all this. We're going to create a can damage variable. Go ahead and promote that to a new variable. I'm going to move this over here. And then out of here, for the capsule collision, we'll set this so that the true goes through it, and then we'll pop that in there. And this should work. Good. And then my character died. Just like that. Okay, so real quickly, I'm just going to go through here and I'm just going to label some things so that they're nice and organized. Increase speed. Okay, so one thing that I forgot to do is if the player gets out of its engagement range, we need to reset the target back to, or we need to clear this variable. So we'll just do a setter for it. Plug it in like that. And then that takes care of that. Okay, so I was looking through our logic here. There's a couple things that we need to fix real quick. So this dodge distance data, we've never set that after we created it. So let's go into our variables, and we need to look for the dodge distance. Okay. Okay, so that should fix our dodge now. Let's try it out real quick. Okay, so before we end the video, there's one more thing I would like to do, and that is to make our AI flee if his health gets too low. So what we need to do is we need to open up our EAI states enumerator again, and then we're going to add a new enumerator, and then this one we're going to call flee. And so there's a number of ways to handle this, and I will show you one way that I like to do. So if we go to our new AI folder here, I'm going to create a new blueprint, and this one's just going to be a regular active blueprint. And then so let's name this BP flee point. There we go. Let's go ahead and open it up. And this, we can pretty much put anything we want to in here. I'm just going to add a cube here, and I'm going to shrink it down to like 0.1. I'm going to compile it, save it. And so let's drag these into our level here. Sorry, my computer's running a little slow. So I'm going to drag this into here. And then I'm just going to kind of sprinkle them around the level. So kind of just putting them, you know, over here. I'll put it like somewhere in the corner too. That works for me. Okay, so now what we're going to do, let's go back to our AI. And so we have our flee here now. What we want to do is whenever we're making a decision, let's see, actually let's do it down when we're taking the damage here. So we want to do it so here is where the death logic is. So anytime he's getting damaged, it's going to fire through here. We're going to get our health, and then we're going to do less or equal to. I'm going to promote this to a variable, and we're going to call it flee threshold. I'm going to create a boolean, plug it in here, and plug the false down over here. So what we want to do is, if it reaches like a health threshold, let's say he gets down to, like a health of 30, then we can ask, you know, should he flee? And when we're asking that, what we can do is, you guessed it, random float and range. Zero to 100. Then we're going to do a less or equal to. Promote this to a variable, and we're going to do odds of fleeing. And let's say we want to make like some really cowardice enemies that'll like flee, that have a high chance of fleeing. I'm just going to set this to, like 80. So there's a high chance of him fleeing whenever we're going to do this testing, right? So we'll go here. And then if he's not going to flee, then we're just going to continue on with the rest of our logic. Scooch this a little closer here. And so here, we're going to set the state to, the AI state to fleeing. And perhaps we might want to stop his movement first. So stop the movement, and then we'll switch it to fleeing. And then there's also one other thing we want to do, which is if he's already fleeing, we don't want him to continue fleeing, right? Or once he's fleed once, we don't want that to continue. So I'm going to create a new boolean here. And then let's do, I'm going to promote this to a variable. We're going to call this is fleeing. Okay, so if he's fleeing, then we don't want him to try to flee again. We also don't want him to move to the character, and we don't want him to dodge. All we want him to be able to do still is react to being hit, which is right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new event, and then I'm just going to call this hit reaction. Actually, I should probably name it something different. Maybe like, is fleeing. There we go. Okay. That should take care of that. So if he's already fleeing, then all we need to do is just have him be able to take hit reactions. Otherwise, he's going to flee. And then we also need to set this to true once that happens. We'll scooch that over, set fleeing to true. So we do flee. Let's also, I'm going to copy both of these, and then out of our fleeing logic, I'm going to paste these here. I'm going to hit stop, and then I'm going to do I guess we could do make decision. If we do that and he's far enough away from the character, he should be able to roam. But we also need to do an AI move to. On success. And so now let's promote this destination to flee destination. Pawn is self. Stop on overlap. We also, let's see here. I think it would be okay if we left this to be like we don't stop the brain as it's happening. And once that happens, we also need to make sure that the character isn't facing, or that the AI isn't facing the character. So let's set look at target to false. Whoops. Here we go. Alright, so once he reaches his destination, I'm going to set is fleeing to false again. That way we can enable this logic again, like if he should flee or whatnot. And we already told it to stop movement. Okay, let's collapse this into a node. Actually, no, before I do that, there is one thing that we need to do. So, on begin play, what we need to do is we need to get all of the actors, the flee points that we created. So what we should do, I'm going to do that at the very end here. I'm going to search for get all actors of class. And then BP flee point. Okay, and then we're going to add that to an array. So I want to promote that to a variable. Call this flee locations. So now what we need to do is we need to create a function that will find the furthest flee location from our AI's position. So to do that, let's go back down here. We're going to get our flee locations. We're going to do a for each loop. And since we're doing a for each loop, it might be best to create this function and then put it down here to determine before it goes to here, since it will be firing every 0.2 seconds. So let's go ahead and I'm just going to scooch this over here first, and then we'll create the function and then we'll pop it down there. So what we need to do is get distance to. The other actor will be the flee location blueprints. We also need to create a new float variable. We're going to call this flee distance. And so what we need to do with this function is we need to, like I said, find the furthest location away from our character. So before we do the for each loop, we're going to drag this out and set this to 0. And then what we do, since we're getting the distance to, we need to ask, is it greater than the flee distance? And so since we're setting it to 0, it's going to start at 0. And then if it is further away than 0, which of course it probably will be, we need to take this flee distance and then set this as the new distance, as well as set the actor as the flee actor, right? But what we can do, we don't have to actually set the actor as a reference. We can just do get actor location, and then we'll set this as the flee destination, right? Okay, cool. So this is essentially our function right here. So let's go ahead. I'm going to select all this. I'm going to collapse it to a function. and we'll call this function get flee location. Let's go ahead and open it up. And so what we're going to do is we're going to pull out of the completed and search for return node. And then we're going to get that flee destination, and we're going to add it here and then plug it into the return node. So this is the result value. Real quick, give us a little space. So before we call flee, we need to run this function here. We set the flee destination right here. Let's see. Actually, what I should do, I should probably set this here. I'm going to drag this in here. We'll set this as the flee destination. But what I would like to do, I'm going to delete this, compile it, and then I'm going to hit promote to a local variable. We'll call this furthest flee location. And then we'll set that here. Okay, so we set our flee location, and then we tell it to flee, or yeah, flee destination. And there we go. That should take care of it. Let's go ahead and collapse this into a node. Call it flee. We'll compile it. He's taken off. Alright. So yeah, it seems to be working. Okay, so we've done pretty good for this video. There's one more thing that I want to do, and on pawn sensing right here, we forgot to set this target acquired back to false whenever the player goes out of its attack range, and we also want to change this make decision here to move to target. So whenever the pawn senses the player, it's going to move to the target. So let's go ahead and copy this target acquired here and go into our make decision. I'm going to scooch all this over. There we go. I'm going to take this target inside of our look at rotation, which is in our event tick. I'm going to convert it to a validated get so that it will only rotate towards our character if it has a valid target. Okay, there's one last thing to fix before I end this video. And that's one thing I noticed when I was testing it out. Whenever the AI would die, it would continue to shoot projectiles even though it was already dead. So all you need to do is go into your fire projectiles collapse node, and then coming out of the fire projectile, just do a check to see if the AI is dead or not. But yeah, let's give this one more go here and see how things are.